As I stood at the edge of the beach, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow that danced on the water's surface. I scanned the horizon, feeling the gentle breeze against my skin. Being the head lifeguard came with its share of responsibilities. But lately, a sense of unease had settled in my gut. I couldn't shake the whispers I'd heard among the locals, tales of missing people, strange noises at night, and shadows lurking beneath the waves that seemed to linger longer than they should. The sand felt cool beneath my feet as I walked along the shoreline, watching families pack up their beach gear. Children laughed and chased the receding waves, their joy a stark contrast to the growing dread I felt inside. I glanced at the water again, half expecting to see something watching us from beneath the surface. "Hey, Jake!" Sarah called out, breaking me from my thoughts. She was a fellow lifeguard and my closest friend. "You're not getting spooked by those old tales, are you?" She laughed as she approached, but I forced a smile, my mind still racing with worry. "Just keeping an eye out," I replied, my gaze drifting back to the darkening water. As the sun sank below the horizon, the beach transformed. The vibrant colors of the sunset faded into deep blues and purples, and the sound of crashing waves grew louder, more ominous. The lifeguard tower stood tall, a solitary beacon in the encroaching darkness. I knew my shift was far from over. The night shift was always the most challenging, and tonight felt different. "Remember to keep the lights on," Sarah reminded me, her voice barely audible over the waves. "And don't let the kids wander too far into the water." I nodded, watching her walk back to her station, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach. With the last of the beachgoers leaving, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on my shoulders. I adjusted my red lifeguard tube and continued patrolling the water's edge, the moonlight reflecting off the surface like shimmering diamonds. It was beautiful, yes, but I knew beauty could often hide danger beneath. As I walked, I heard the whispers again, carried by the night air. The tide wraith. They were just stories, I told myself, local legends meant to frighten children. Yet every so often, I would catch a glimpse of something in the water, something dark and serpentine slipping beneath the waves. I shook my head, dismissing it as a trick of the light. The night wore on, and the beach was eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft lapping of the water against the shore. As I continued my watch, I spotted a flicker of movement in the distance. I squinted, trying to discern what it was. A figure? Or perhaps just the reflection of the moon? My heart raced as I took a tentative step closer. Suddenly, a chilling scream pierced the silence, echoing across the beach. My instincts kicked in, adrenaline surging through my veins. I sprinted toward the sound, my mind racing with possibilities. What if it was real? What if the stories were true? I reached the spot where the scream had come from, my heart pounding in my chest. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the beach. But when I arrived, I found only silence. No one was there. Just the waves crashing and a sense of foreboding that clung to the air. I looked out at the water, feeling a shiver run down my spine, wondering if tonight would finally unveil the secrets that lay beneath the surface. The silence that followed the scream pressed down on me like a weight. I hesitated for a moment, torn between the instinct to run toward danger and the voice in my head that screamed to turn back. I had always been trained to protect, to save, but tonight felt different. The hairs on my arms stood on end, and my heart raced as I stood at the edge of the water, peering into the darkness. I took a deep breath, forcing my feet to move forward. The moonlight barely penetrated the waves, casting shadows that danced just beneath the surface. I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Hello? Is anyone there?" My words echoed back to me, swallowed by the vastness of the ocean. I felt foolish for even asking. I knew the stories and I knew the warnings, but something compelled me to search. I moved closer to the water's edge, scanning the shoreline for any sign of distress. The sound of the waves crashing against the sand was almost deafening, but I strained to listen for anything out of the ordinary. A splash, a cry, anything that would tell me I wasn't alone. Each step felt like I was venturing deeper into a nightmare, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know what had happened. As I walked, the beach stretched endlessly before me. I glanced back, debating whether to retreat to the safety of the lifeguard tower. but the scream echoed in my mind, urging me to keep going. I ventured further along the shore, my eyes darting between the darkness of the water and the dimly lit sand, hoping to find something. Anything that would explain the terror I felt. The night seemed to stretch on, the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Just when I thought I saw something moving in the water, a wave crashed over it, leaving nothing but foam and silence in its wake. My pulse pounded in my ears, and fear gnawed at my insides. I was about to turn back when I heard it again. A faint, distant cry, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. With a jolt, I bolted back toward the lifeguard tower, my instincts overpowering my better judgment. I needed to regroup, to think clearly. The stories of the tide wraith echoed in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. What if the legends were true? What if I had just made a grave mistake by searching alone? When I finally reached the tower, I was breathless and shaken. The familiar structure loomed like a guardian against the night, but something felt off. As I approached the door, I noticed a small figure silhouetted against the glow of the moonlight. My heart sank as I recognized the shape of a child, a little girl, no more than 6 or 7, with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked, crouching down to her level. "What's wrong?" She looked up at me, tears glistening on her cheeks. "My sister," she began, her voice trembling. "She was taken by the waterman." My stomach dropped at her words. I knew exactly who she meant, the tide wraith. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happened? Where did you last see her?" The little girl shook her head, her small hands gripping the hem of her shirt. "We were playing by the water, and she said she wanted to go in. I told her not to, but then I heard her scream." An icy chill ran through me. I knelt closer, trying to comfort her. "It's going to be okay. We'll find her. Can you tell me more about what she looked like?" "She had a blue swimsuit," the girl replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And she was laughing. Then she just disappeared." A surge of determination washed over me. I stood up, glancing back toward the water, now a dark abyss. "Stay here. I'm going to find your sister." The little girl nodded, her eyes wide with fear but trusting. I took a deep breath and turned back toward the ocean, the weight of responsibility now heavier than ever. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. If there was even a chance I could save her sister, I had to try. As I walked along the beach, the darkness of the night began to wane, slowly giving way to the first hints of dawn. My heart raced with anxiety as I searched every inch of the shore, hoping against hope to find any sign of the little girl's sister. The waves crashed rhythmically, but they offered no answers, only a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface. I had left the girl at the lifeguard tower, where she had sat trembling, her eyes wide with fear. I called the police to come and get her, knowing she was only 10 years old. Her older sister was her guardian, and the thought of what could happen to her without that protection gnawed at me. What would become of the little girl if her sister was lost? I couldn't shake the image of the girl's tear-streaked face from my mind. With every step I took, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. How was I supposed to find her sister when the ocean seemed to swallow everything whole? I moved from one end of the beach to the other, scanning the sand for footprints, any sign that might lead me to her. I called out into the night, my voice echoing into the void, but received only silence in return. The sun began to rise, casting a pale orange glow across the horizon. The beauty of the dawn felt cruel against the backdrop of my worry. I remembered the little girl's trembling voice as she described her sister in that blue swimsuit, laughing and carefree. I pushed myself harder, willing my legs to move faster as I combed the shoreline. The chill in the air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. I was lost in my thoughts, my mind racing with possibilities of where her sister could be. As the sun continued to climb, I spotted a figure in the distance. My heart soared with a flicker of hope, but as I drew closer, I realized it was just a piece of driftwood. Frustration surged within me. I felt like I was chasing shadows, and every moment that passed was another moment the tide could claim her sister. The stories I had heard echoed in my mind, tales of the tide wraith and the way it lured people into the depths. Just as the sun broke free from the horizon, painting the sky with vibrant colors, I spotted an old man sitting on a rock near the water. "Bartholomew," or Bart as he was known, was the town's eccentric character. He was always talking about monsters and things that went bump in the night. In a place like this, with so many legends swirling around, he had become something of a local fixture, albeit a strange one. "Jake," he called out, his voice gravelly and weathered, "you look like you've seen a ghost." I approached him, my heart pounding. "Bart, I need your help. A girl went missing last night. Her sister was taken by the waterman." Bart's eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and mischief. "Ah, the tide wraith. I told you it was real. It only shows itself when the moon is full and the tide is high." I felt a mix of irritation and desperation. "This isn't a joke, Bart. I need to find her. You've seen things. You know the stories better than anyone. Do you have any idea where it might have taken her?" He leaned back against the rock, a knowing smile creeping across his face. "The wraith doesn't just take anyone. It waits for the right moment, when the heart is heavy with sorrow or fear. You must understand that the sea is not just a body of water. It's alive with its own spirit." I clenched my fists, frustration boiling beneath the surface. "I don't have time for riddles. A girl is missing. What should I do?" Bart's expression shifted, and for a moment I saw a flicker of seriousness in his eyes. "You must listen to the water. It will tell you what you seek. But beware, young lifeguard. The wraith is cunning, and it knows how to play with your fears." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I remembered the little girl, alone at the tower, her future uncertain. "I need to find her sister. If you know anything, please tell me." Bart nodded slowly, his gaze drifting toward the ocean. "You may have to venture deeper than you ever have before. The answers lie beneath the surface." With that cryptic warning, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I would not let fear hold me back. I owed it to the little girl and her sister to uncover the truth. As the sun rose higher in the sky, I turned toward the water, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As I stood there, my heart racing and my mind swirling with questions, Bart's gaze locked onto mine, unwavering and intense. "To find the tide wraith's lair," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "you will have to drown." I stared at him, confusion mingling with disbelief. "Drown? You can't be serious. That means I would die." "No, Jake, not this way." Bart's voice was firm, almost soothing. "Drowning in this particular way does not kill you. It transfers your soul to a different realm, a place where the wraith resides. You would need to let go, to surrender to the water." My stomach, the idea of willingly accepting drowning felt impossible. "I can't do that," I said, shaking my head. "I need to find her sister. I can't just give myself to the water." Bart stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as if he could see deep into my soul. "But why, Jake? Why are you the only one who believes in the tide wraith? Why are you the only one holding on to this myth?" His question struck me like a physical blow, and I took a step back, grappling for an answer. Because I have to," I stammered, but the words felt weak even as they left my lips. "Why did you become a lifeguard in the first place?" Bart pressed on, his voice a mix of challenge and curiosity. His question hung heavily in the air, and suddenly I was transported back to a different time, a time before the stories of the tide wraith had clouded my mind. I was a young boy, barely 10, sitting on the beach with my friends. The sun was bright, and laughter filled the air as we splashed in the waves, feeling invincible. I remembered the day vividly. My father, a lifeguard himself, had taken me to the beach for the first time. He had been so proud, showing me how to swim, teaching me the importance of safety in the water. "Always watch out for others, Jake," he said, his voice booming with authority. "Being a lifeguard is about protecting people. It's a calling." I had watched him with admiration, my heart swelling with pride as he rescued a struggling swimmer from the undertow. It was the first time I had truly understood the weight of responsibility, the rush of saving someone's life. That day I had made a promise to myself. I would be just like him. I would become a lifeguard. But now, years later, that promise felt like a burden. My thoughts drifted back to the little girl I had left at the tower, and I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. I had to keep her safe. I had to find her sister. But the fear of drowning loomed large in my mind, a specter I was not ready to face. "Jake," Bart's voice pulled me back from my memories, "you have to decide what you believe. If you want to save that girl's sister, you have to embrace the unknown. The tide wraith is not just a myth. It is a force, a guardian of the ocean. Only by facing it can you truly understand how to help. I looked at Bart, searching his eyes for a glimmer of reassurance, but all I found was an unsettling truth. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on my chest. I was torn between my duty as a lifeguard and the fear of the depths that lay ahead. I don't know if I can do that, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. What if I don't come back? Bart took a step closer, his expression softening. You have a choice, Jake. You can walk away and live with the uncertainty, or you can take the plunge and discover the truth. Either way, you must confront your fears. The ocean is calling, and the tide wraith awaits. As the sun continued to rise, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I felt a surge of determination. I had always believed in protecting others, and now I had to protect the little girl's sister, no matter the cost. Perhaps it was time to face the darkness, to confront the unknown and find out what lay beneath the surface. Reluctantly, I nodded to Bart, feeling the gravity of my choice settle heavily on my shoulders. Fine, I'll do it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how. Bart's eyes glinted with an eerie wisdom as he replied, Not now, Jake. You must return tonight when the tide is at its highest. That is when you'll have the best chance to reach the wraith's lair. His words hung in the air, and I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. I had made my decision, but a part of me was terrified of what awaited me in the depths of the ocean. As the sun climbed higher, signaling the end of my shift, I made my way back to the lifeguard tower. I spotted Sarah packing up her things, a curious expression on her face. Hey, Jake, she called out, her brow furrowing. I saw you talking to Bart. What's going on? I shrugged, trying to play it cool. It's nothing, just the usual crazy talk. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. You know how he is. You shouldn't let him get into your head. I'm fine, I reassured her, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my tone. Sarah didn't look convinced, but she let it go for now. Just be careful, okay? You know how people talk about him. He's always around when things go wrong. I nodded, grateful for her concern, but my mind was already elsewhere. I gathered my things and left the tower, the weight of the day hanging heavily on my heart. When I returned home, the familiar surroundings felt different, almost surreal. I glanced at my possessions, taking in the photos on the walls, the small trinkets that held memories of laughter and joy. This could be the end, and I felt a deep ache in my chest. I thought of my family, of my parents, and the sacrifices they had made for me. I picked up my phone, contemplating calling them, hearing their voices one last time. But as I hovered over their contact, doubt washed over me. What would I say? Hey, Mom, I might be drowning tonight. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I hung up, my heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. I walked to my desk and grabbed a blank piece of paper, the pen trembling slightly in my hand. I began to write, pouring out everything I felt. I wanted them to know I loved them. I wanted them to understand why I was doing this. I could be facing something unimaginable, and I wanted them to have a piece of me, a reminder of my love. After I finished the note, I placed it on the table where they would find it. A part of me hoped they would never need to read it, that I would return home safe and sound. But the fear of what lay ahead weighed heavily on my mind. Tonight, I had agreed to meet Bart again to discuss the drowning, or what he had called spiritual drowning. I needed to rest, to gather my strength, for it could be my last sleep ever. I lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. As I closed my eyes, I felt an uneasy mix of fear and determination. I had chosen this path, and now I had to see it through. I took a deep breath, letting the darkness pull me under, surrendering to the uncertainty of what awaited me when the tide was at its highest. I jolted awake, my body stiff and disoriented, just 1 minute before my alarm was set to go off. I always hated when that happened. It felt like I was being robbed of precious moments of sleep. The house was still, yet it wasn't quiet. The hum of the fan droned on, a constant backdrop that paralyzed me for a moment as I lay there, gathering my thoughts. Just as I began to drift back into a light slumber, my alarm blared to life, cutting through the haze of sleep. Groaning, I rubbed my eyes and swung my legs over the side of the bed, feeling the coolness of the wooden floor beneath my feet. I shuffled to the bathroom, splashing water on my face to wake myself up. After a quick shower, I slipped into my clothes and grabbed my phone, putting on my favorite podcast. The familiar voices filled my mind, providing a comforting distraction as I prepared for what lay ahead. It was 4 p.m. I knew Sarah would just be getting off her shift, but I didn't want to include her in this. What if she was right? What if Bart was making this all up? The thought of being the Tide Wraith sent shivers down my spine. I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear that clung to me like a shadow. I had to focus on the task at hand. I stepped outside, the warmth of the late afternoon sun hitting my skin. The small coffee shop where I had agreed to meet Bart was just a short walk away. As I made my way down the familiar streets, my mind drifted to my family. I thought about my parents and the support they had always given me, their unwavering belief in my choices. I also thought of Sarah, her laughter and kindness, a comforting presence in my life. But now, as I approached the coffee shop, I couldn't help but wonder about my future. Was it all worth it to save a stranger I didn't even know? The question loomed large in my mind, but I couldn't find an answer. Just as the weight of my uncertainty threatened to overwhelm me, I felt a sudden grip on my shoulder. "Jake!" Bart's voice cut through the fog of my thoughts. I turned to face him, startled. His weathered face was lit with an unusual intensity, as if he had been waiting for me to arrive. "You're here," I stammered, trying to regain my composure. "I was just thinking." "Don't think too much, boy," he interrupted, an unsettling grin spreading across his face. "We have much to discuss, and time is not on our side." I nodded, a mix of apprehension and determination swirling within me. I had made my choice, and now I had to see it through. As we entered the coffee shop, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the chatter of patrons. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead, ready to confront the unknown. Minutte's coffee shop was a cozy little haven nestled between two larger storefronts, its presence a comforting constant in the town. The exterior was painted a warm shade of yellow, with cheerful blue accents framing the windows. Inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods enveloped you like a warm hug. The walls were adorned with local art, and shelves were lined with awards for the coffee and pies that had made the place a beloved staple in the community. As I stepped inside with Bart, I felt a sense of familiarity wash over me, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that lay ahead. The shop was bustling with patrons, each corner filled with laughter and conversation. A handwritten sign above the counter proclaimed the day's specials, and I couldn't help but smile at the sight of it. Bart led the way to the back corner, where a small round table awaited us. He held a large, ancient-looking book under his arm, its leather cover cracked and weathered, as if it had been through countless hands over the years. "I'll have the house special," Bart said to the hostess, whose name I would soon learn was Minute. "A caramel kiss and a slice of pumpkin pie, please." She smiled warmly, her presence radiating a sort of homey charm. "Great choice, Bart. And you, young man?" she asked, turning her attention to me. "I'll just have a hot chocolate, extra whipped cream," I replied, feeling a bit out of place next to Bart, who seemed so at home in this cafe. Minute jotted down our orders and made small talk as she prepared to leave. "You know, Bart, I love that book of yours. It looks so antique, such a treasure." Bart's face lit up with a smile. "Ah, it's a novel I've been working on," he said, the words flowing easily from his lips. I glanced at him, unsure of how convincing he was in that lie. But Minute seemed satisfied, nodding enthusiastically before moving to the counter to place our orders. Once she walked away, Bart opened the book, revealing pages filled with handwritten notes and illustrations that seemed to pulse with hidden knowledge. I leaned in closer, my curiosity piqued. "This," Bart began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "is something that has been passed down in my family for generations. What I'm about to show you is not meant for just anyone. It is meant for those brave enough to confront the horrors that actually walk on this earth and swim in the depths of the darkest sea." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. I felt a shiver run down my spine, the gravity of the moment settling in. I wanted to know more, but a part of me hesitated. Before Bart could continue, Minute returned with our orders, setting the steaming mugs and pie in front of us. "Here you go, enjoy," she said with a bright smile. Bart thanked her, and as she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were entering a world beyond the ordinary. Bart's friendly demeanor shifted as he turned back to the book, his expression serious. He opened to the first page, revealing intricate drawings of sea creatures and notes in a script that looked as old as the book itself. "Are you ready for this, Jake?" he asked, his eyes glinting with anticipation. I took a deep breath, knowing that whatever lay ahead would change everything I thought I knew. "Let's find out," I replied, steeling myself for what was to come. As Bart opened the ancient book, he began to reveal the incredible backstory of his family. "You see, Jake," he started, his voice low and serious, "I am part of a secret society. We have existed for centuries, trained from a young age to protect the world from the monsters that inhabit it." I leaned in, intrigued yet skeptical. "Monsters? You mean like the ones in stories?" Bart nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, the world calls them myths, but they are real. Going back to the very beginning of time, my society has been what protected humanity. Myths were the original breed of monsters, and as they began to disappear, people started to associate them with something that wasn't real, a bedtime story to scare the kids. But that couldn't be further from the truth." I raised an eyebrow, trying to absorb his words. "So you're saying that these so-called myths lost a war against your society?" "Exactly," Bart replied, his eyes gleaming with passion. "Only the best myths survive to see the world today. Most of those myths were generals back in the war, leaders of their kind." I couldn't help but scoff, a mix of disbelief and amusement bubbling up. "You mean to tell me the Chupacabra was a decorated war general?" Bart's expression shifted, his gaze drifting as if he were lost in thought. "Actually, one of the best," he said almost dreamily, before snapping back to reality. I raised my eyebrows, trying to comprehend the absurdity of it all. "Right? So what, we're just supposed to believe that these creatures are out there, still lurking in the shadows?" Before Bart could respond, I excused myself to go to the bathroom, needing a moment to process everything I'd just heard. As I entered the small restroom, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Thoughts raced through my mind. What if Bart was telling the truth? What if I was walking into something I couldn't comprehend? The idea of turning back nagged at me. Maybe I should just walk out, leave this nonsense behind and go home. But as I struggled with the thought, I heard a voice in my mind, clear and concise. "Jake, are you okay?" I froze, my heart racing. The voice was unmistakably Bart's, yet it echoed in my head as if he were standing right beside me. I glanced around the bathroom, half expecting to see him there, but it was empty. "Jake," the voice repeated, more urgent this time. "Talk to me." I shook my head, trying to dispel the confusion. "What the hell?" I muttered to myself. Was I losing my mind? "Just breathe," Bart's voice urged, calming and steady. "You're not losing it. You're on the brink of something important. Trust me." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of connection to Bart, even if it was just in my mind. "Why are you in my head?" I asked, half exasperated and half curious. "Because you're about to make a choice," he replied, "and I want to make sure you're ready for it." Stepping back from the sink, I leaned against the cool tiles, grappling with the weight of his words. Was I truly ready for this? Was I ready to embrace the truth of what Bart had shared? I took another deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. Maybe this was my chance to confront the unknown, to discover the truth that had been hidden beneath the surface for so long. As I prepared to leave the bathroom, I felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. Whatever lay ahead, I had to face it. I pushed the door open and headed back to the table, ready to dive deeper into this world Bart had opened up for me. As Bart settled into his chair, he seemed to transform, his demeanor shifting from eccentric local to a figure of ancient wisdom. "My family," he began, his voice steady, "was one of the greatest in the secret society. We were warriors of renown, trained from birth to face the monsters that stalk the earth. The legends of my ancestors are documented in this very book." He gestured to the tome resting on the table between us, its pages filled with the history of those who came before him. I leaned in, captivated by his words. "Warriors of renown? What happened to you?" Before he could respond, I blurted out, No offense, but you're known as the town crazy person. How did you end up here? Bart chuckled, a warm laugh that resonated in the busy coffee shop. Ah, I'm getting there, my friend. You see, after the war, my society broke up into sects, each faction hunting the remaining myths on their own. It was a mistake. Together we were strong, united against the darkness, but apart we never stood a chance. He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. Before long, it was time for us to go into hiding, just as we had sent the myths into hiding. Some of my brethren refused, declaring they would rather die than hide from the monsters that still roamed the wilderness. Others accepted their fates and assimilated into society, living normal lives. I listened intently, my mind racing with questions. What about you? What did your family do? Bart's expression darkened slightly. My parents told my brothers and me that we were free to choose our paths, but they only knew one way: war. He paused, the weight of his memories hanging heavily in the air. The next day, they were gone. What happened to your brothers? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Bart's gaze flickered for a moment, as if he were staring into the past. That is another story, he said, his tone shifting, the shadow of pain crossing his face. Okay, but what is the name of your secret society? I pressed, needing to understand more about the world Bart had just introduced me to. He looked at me with a seriousness that sent a chill down my spine. You must know that once I reveal the name, you are a part of it. Forever. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over me like a heavy blanket. What do you mean? How can I be part of something I don't even understand? Bart leaned back in his chair, his eyes boring into mine. The society is called the Order of the Veil. We have protected humanity from the myths for centuries, and now, with the remnants of our kind scattered, we need warriors who are willing to confront the darkness once more. If you choose to accept this knowledge, you will be bound to our cause, to fight against the horrors that threaten our world. A wave of uncertainty washed over me. I had come seeking answers, but now I was being offered a destiny I had never imagined. I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Bart nodded, understanding in his eyes. No one is ever truly ready, but sometimes the choice finds you. You must decide if you are willing to embrace the legacy of the warriors who came before you. As I sat there, grappling with the enormity of what Bart was asking, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. The world was darker than I had ever known, and if there was even a chance to confront those shadows, I had to consider it. Tell me more about the Order of the Veil, I said, my voice steadying. I want to know what I'm getting into. Bart smiled, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Then let's begin. Just as Bart was about to delve deeper into the history of the Order of the Veil, a familiar voice cut through the air. Jake! I turned to see Sarah rising from a booth near us, dressed in a baggy jacket that swamped her frame and a red baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. She had clearly been watching us for a moment before making her presence known. I was worried about you, she continued, her tone laced with concern. After my shift, I was going to stop by your house. I just needed to change first. I hadn't even thought about the fact that she might come looking for me. I'm fine, really, I said, but she pressed on, urgency in her voice. On my way to your place, I saw Bart walking up to you on the sidewalk. I couldn't just let him get you alone, so I grabbed a hoodie and my old baseball cap and slipped in here without being noticed. With a determined look, she walked over to our table, her eyes darting between Bart and me. Look, Jake, I don't know what this is about, but Bart needs to leave you alone. You're not joining any secret cult on my watch. I was speechless, a mix of surprise and gratitude washing over me. Maybe she would talk some sense into me after all. Just as I was about to respond, I heard Bart's voice in my mind again. Ah, so you do have one, I looked at Bart, confused. What do you mean? You're sacred, he replied aloud this time, his tone teasing yet serious. Sarah furrowed her brow, clearly puzzled. Sacred? What the hell does that even mean? Jake, we need to leave, now. Bart chuckled, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Oh no, trust me, Sarah, you're going to want to hear this. With a gentle nudge, I scooted over to make room for her. Sarah hesitated for a moment, casting a wary glance at Bart, but ultimately she sat down, crossing her arms defensively. The atmosphere shifted as Bart leaned in, his demeanor shifting from playful to earnest. "You see, Sarah, Jake is special. He has the potential to be part of something greater than himself, to embrace a legacy that has protected humanity for centuries. The Order of the Veil is not just a secret society, it's a calling." I could feel the weight of Sarah's gaze on me, searching for answers. "Jake, is this what you want, to be part of some order?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. Part of me wanted to dismiss the idea entirely, but another part, the part that felt the thrill of adventure and destiny, was drawn to it. "Sarah, I started, but Bart interjected. "You must understand that fate often intertwines the lives of those who are meant to stand together. Jake's destiny may very well be tied to yours." I glanced at Sarah, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Would she understand? Could she accept this path I was considering? "Let's just talk about this," I said, trying to bridge the gap between us. "I need to know what it all means." Bart nodded, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Exactly. And the choice to join us is not to be taken lightly. But once you understand the truth, it will become clear what you must do." As the three of us sat there, a strange bond began to form, one that was woven from the threads of uncertainty and shared purpose. Whatever lay ahead, I knew we would face it together. The path before us was uncertain, but with Sarah by my side, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Bart looked at us both, a knowing smile on his face. Welcome to the beginning of something extraordinary. As Bart leaned back in his chair, he began to finish his story about his family. "My sect is called Fables. We were born a millennium ago, tasked with facing the worst myths that ever existed. We've battled creatures and legends that would chill the blood of any ordinary person." Sarah couldn't resist chiming in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "So, what you're saying is that you fought Bigfoot's grandpa?" Bart looked at her, perplexed, before responding, "No, but I've known a Bigfoot or two in my day." Sarah seemed temporarily lost for words, her expression a mix of disbelief and amusement. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Still, as I turned to Bart, I felt a wave of skepticism wash over me. "It's just hard to believe. How could you have such knowledge of hidden information in this short life? Even with the book, it seems you know more than any normal person could. You barely seem to be in your early 40s. Bart regarded me for a moment, his expression serious. "To understand that, I'll have to show you something." Before I could respond, he reached across the table, taking both Sarah's and my hands in his. As soon as his fingers wrapped around ours, a strange warmth surged through me. The world around us began to blur and fade, and in an instant, we were thrust through a swirling tunnel of time. Images flashed before our eyes, scenes of ancient history that unfolded like a grand tapestry. We saw Pangaea being split apart, the continents drifting away from one another as the earth reshaped itself. The air was thick with the sounds of roaring beasts and the crashing of waves. Next, we were transported to the construction of the pyramids, workers laboring under the scorching sun, their sweat glistening as they hoisted massive stones into place. The grandeur of the structures rose before us, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Then we witnessed saber-toothed tigers prowling through a prehistoric landscape, their fierce eyes scanning the horizon for prey. The air crackled with tension as these magnificent creatures roamed their territory. Finally, we saw the Great Flood, a cataclysmic event that reshaped the world. Water surged over the land, sweeping away everything in its path. We felt the desperation of those caught in the torrents, their cries echoing in our ears. But what struck me the most was that at every specific event, we saw Bart. He was there, a silent observer, his presence woven into the fabric of history. He stood alongside ancient civilizations, witnessing the rise and fall of empires, the battles fought, and the myths that emerged. As the vision faded, we found ourselves back in the coffee shop, breathless and disoriented. "What the hell was that?" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. I turned to Bart, my mind racing with questions. "You've been there for all of it? You've witnessed history?" Bart nodded, his expression somber. "I have seen the world change countless times, and I carry the knowledge of those events within me. That's why I'm here now, to share this with you. The past is not just history, it's a guide to understanding the present and the dangers that lie ahead." I glanced at Sarah, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. This was no longer just a conversation about myths and secret societies. We were standing on the edge of something far more significant than either of us had anticipated. "Do you understand now?" Bart asked, his voice steady. "This isn't just a choice for you, Jake. It's a responsibility." As I sat there, the weight of his words settled over me like a heavy cloak. The world was darker than I had ever known, and now it felt like I had a part to play in the unfolding story. "I think I do," I said slowly, the flicker of determination igniting within me once more. "But what do we do next?" Bart smiled, the warmth returning to his eyes. "Now, we prepare for what's to come." As Bart leaned back in his chair, the atmosphere shifted again, taking on a more serious tone. "The only reason I'm known as the town crazy person is that I've been searching for my successor," he revealed, his eyes locking onto mine. "Someone who has been fated to fight alongside me until the end of the myths." I felt a stirring of hope mixed with anxiety. "Successor? You mean like a partner in this fight?" "Yes," Bart continued, his voice steady. "I have a connection with them, but it isn't exactly GPS coordinates. I knew I was close when I arrived in this town, but I could never pinpoint who it was. Whenever I thought I had it figured out, I was wrong." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Word began to spread about me, asking people strange questions, and that's how I became the town crazy person. At first, I didn't like it, but then I realized it actually helped me find my successor quicker. People started talking, and I was able to gather information. He leaned closer, his intensity palpable. "I felt hopeful that I had found them when you didn't run away right after I talked about having to drown. You didn't flinch, even when I mentioned the tide wraith. But I knew I had truly found you when you heard me in your mind and talked back to me while you were in the bathroom." The implications of his words hung in the air. "So you think I'm your successor?" I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. Bart nodded. "Once I find you, you'll be ready to confront the tide wraith, but I can't do it alone." I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. What could I even do? I'm just a human. You're immortal. "Ah, but that's where you're wrong," Bart replied, his eyes glinting with conviction. "Fables are born special, but ultimately they are created. Created by death. That's where your drowning comes into play." Before I could process that revelation, Sarah chimed in, her brows knitted together. "Okay, but how does this include me?" Bart turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Your role is crucial, Sarah. You're not just a bystander in this. You both share a connection, one that could prove vital in the fight against the myths. The bond between you two may be what allows you to face the darkness together." I glanced at Sarah, who looked as confused as I felt. "What do you mean? How am I supposed to help?" Bart took a deep breath, preparing to explain. "When I lost my sacred, I lost not only a part of myself, but also a significant connection to the fable's power. It's a bond that strengthens us, ties us to our purpose, and allows us to channel the energy needed to confront the myths. Without that connection, I've been fighting an uphill battle." "What happened to your sacred?" I asked. My curiosity piqued. Bart's expression darkened, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "That's a story for another time. But know this, I'm not just searching for a successor, I'm also seeking to restore what was lost. Together, we can forge a new path, one that will lead us to reclaim my connection and ultimately defeat the tide wraith." As his words hung in the air, I felt a mix of determination and trepidation. This was no longer just about stories or myths. It was about a tangible fight against a darkness that threatened our world. Bart's gaze shifted between us, and I could see the hope in his eyes. "The journey ahead will not be easy, but if we stand together, we might just have a chance to change everything." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowed with determination. "I demand to know what happened to your sacred, Bart. If I'm supposed to be Jake's sacred, whatever that means, then I have a right to know." Bart took a deep breath, the weight of her demand pressing down on him. "Her name was Nirvana," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was my everything." I could see the shift in Bart's demeanor, the memories flooding back to him. "I met her when we were very young. We grew up together in the ways of the fables. She only had a father. Her mother had been lost to the myths long before we met." He chuckled softly, a bittersweet smile on his face. Her father hated me. It was as if he knew we were intertwined, but he didn't think I was good enough for her. Sarah interjected, shock evident in her voice. Wait, Nirvana was your wife? I glanced at Sarah, both of us processing the revelation. You mean you were married? I asked, equally surprised. Bart nodded, his gaze distant. Yes, we were, but a sacred can be many things. They don't have to fall in love and ride into the sunset, but they might. Bart's expression darkened as he continued, the weight of the past heavy on his shoulders. When the Order of the Veil split, Nirvana and I chose to keep hunting. Together, we took out many myths, our bond growing stronger with each victory. But then we encountered the Tide Wraith. He paused, the pain etched on his face. We thought the myths were all extinct after the war. We believed we were hunting a siren, but we were wrong. The Tide Wraith took us by surprise. It struck Nirvana, and before I could react, it fled back into the depths. I felt a chill run down my spine as Bart's words hung in the air. You didn't catch it? I asked, incredulous. Bart shook his head slowly. I chased after it, but to no avail. I walked the ocean floors for years, searching for any trace of her. Finally, I came up for air, and I realized my love was gone. His voice trembled as he continued. I knew I had to avenge her, but I couldn't do it alone. That's when I set out to find my successor, someone who could help me confront the Tide Wraith and bring justice for Nirvana. Bart's expression shifted, the memories clearly painful. I went to find my parents, thinking I might get some guidance or support. Instead, I found Nirvana's father. I told him what happened. He was a broken man, consumed by grief over losing his daughter to the myths. He didn't want to hear about my quest for vengeance. He blamed me for her fate. Sarah's expression softened, the earlier sarcasm replaced by empathy. I can only imagine how that felt. Bart nodded, the weight of his past palpable in the air. I lost not just my love, but also the trust of her family. It was a bitter reminder that the world of myths and the consequences of our battles were not just abstract concepts. They had real, devastating impacts on our lives. As he spoke, I could see how deeply this loss had shaped him. He was a warrior, but he was also a man haunted by the ghosts of his past. I want to help you, Bart, I said, my resolve growing stronger. If I'm meant to fight alongside you, I'll do whatever it takes. Sarah nodded in agreement, her expression serious. Me too. We're in this together. Bart looked at us, his eyes glistening with a mixture of gratitude and determination. Then let's prepare ourselves for the fight ahead. Together, we might just stand a chance against the Tide Wraith and find a way to honor Nirvana's memory. As we sat there, a newfound sense of purpose settled among us. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but we were ready to face it together, united by the bonds we were beginning to forge. As we sat at the coffee shop, the weight of our conversation hung heavily in the air. Bart leaned forward, his expression serious. Before you both leave, there's something you need to know. Sarah, he said, locking eyes with her. By the way, you're going to have to drown too. Sarah, already knowledgeable about the procedure from her earlier spying, nodded softly, though uncertainty flickered across her face. Bart continued, Meet me at the water where Jake found me earlier. Come at sunset and make peace with your existence. As we rose to leave, I turned back to Bart, a question forming in my mind. Just as I was about to speak, I felt the familiar pull of his voice in my head. How will I be able to help? I asked quietly, a hint of desperation in my thoughts. I don't have any combat knowledge or skills. Don't worry, Bart's voice reassured me in my mind. All of that will take care of itself. With that, Sarah and I walked out of the coffee shop, the weight of our task ahead pressing down on us. As we made our way back to my house, I could feel the tension in the air. How do you feel? Sarah asked, glancing at me as we walked. I don't know, I admitted, trying to process everything that had happened. It feels like I'm in a dream or something. She nodded as if she understood. What do you think will happen after we, quote-unquote, spiritually drown? I hesitated before answering. Bart told me it would be okay. She scoffed, raising an eyebrow. When exactly? I took a deep breath, reluctantly revealing my secret. I can speak to Bart in my mind. I can't put my thoughts in his mind, but he can read mine, and I can respond in my head. Sarah looked at me, a mix of disbelief and intrigue in her expression. That's hard to believe, but with everything else going on, I suppose it isn't too crazy. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of our situation. Do you think we'll be able to do that? After all, we're destined to fall in love and be together forever. Her eyes sparkled with mock seriousness. Oh, of course, it's our fate. I chuckled, shaking my head. Spend an eternity with you? I think I'd rather shack up with the tide wraith. We both laughed, the tension easing as we approached my house. As we reached the door, Sarah turned to me, her expression softening. Bye, Jake, she said, pulling me into a warm hug. I'll see you tonight at the water. I watched her walk away, a swirl of emotions churning within me. The sun was beginning its descent in the sky, and I knew sunset was only 2 hours away. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. As I stepped inside my house, the reality of our situation hit me once more. There was no turning back now. The unknown awaited, and I had to be ready. I arrived at the water's edge a little earlier than I intended, my heart racing with anticipation. Bart was already there, sitting on the rocks and gazing down into the water, lost in thought. I walked up to him, curiosity bubbling inside me. What are you looking at? He dodged my question, his expression shifting to something serious. Are you ready? I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I don't know, but I want to be strong for Sarah. Bart nodded, seemingly understanding the importance of that bond. I asked, how will I know what to do once the moment comes? He chuckled softly, a hint of reassurance in his voice. I'll tell you both. Just then, he glanced over at the rocks off to the side. Sarah, how lovely of you to join us. Sarah revealed herself from behind the rocks, stepping forward with a grin. Well, it was worth a shot. I figured I would see how soldierly efficient you actually were. Bart laughed, the tension easing as he motioned for us to gather closer. Let's begin, he explained the process with calm authority. As you drown, the training of the fables will replace your natural cravings and instincts. Your quick reflexes will turn into combative reflexes. Your wandering thoughts will become strategic. Your hunger will come to a halt, and your need for water will decimate. You will no longer need air. Sarah's eyes widened and she interrupted. So we will be dead? Dead? Bart met her gaze, serious yet reassuring. In the traditional human way, yes, but in the way of the fables, you will be reborn. I raised an eyebrow, trying to digest what I was hearing. So we're just special zombies? Bart laughed heartily. Zombies wish they were as cool as us. He continued, revealing more about our transformation. You will still be able to age, reproduce, and feel emotion. You'll even be able to taste food and drink, but if needed, you could go without it. You'll be able to see in the dark, read the minds of those close to you, and possess abilities you never dreamed of. But there's one downside. What's that? I asked, my curiosity piqued. You will only be able to die at the hands of a myth or another fable. You'll outlive your families, walking the earth for eternity until something puts a stop to it. The weight of Bart's words settled heavily in the air. I could feel the gravity of our situation pressing down on me, and I glanced over at Sarah. She looked just as apprehensive as I felt. Are you ready? Bart asked, looking at us closely, gauging our resolve. Together, Sarah and I stepped into the water, feeling the coolness envelop us as it rose to our waists. I could feel the water lapping against my skin, grounding me in the moment. Bart guided us further until we were floating, our bodies supported by the gentle waves. Now, he instructed, relax. He turned us to our sides, allowing us to float effortlessly. I locked eyes with Sarah, the world around us fading into the background. A mixture of fear and excitement coursed through me, the reality of what we were about to do sinking in. Before long, everything went dark. As I regained consciousness, the first thing I noticed was the soft sound of waves lapping against the shore. I blinked a few times, the sunlight filtering through my eyelashes, and when I finally focused, I turned to see Sarah lying beside me. She looked just as disoriented, her eyes wide and searching. We exchanged a glance, both of us lost for words, the enormity of what had just happened settling in. It was as if the world around us had shifted, and we were still trying to find our place in it. Finally, I heard her voice in my mind, clear and soothing. How do you feel? I feel okay, I replied, testing the connection. It was surreal, but somehow comforting. Same here. A little sandy, but okay, she responded, a hint of amusement lacing her thoughts. As I took in our surroundings, I realized we were covered in sand. the remnants of our transformation clinging to our skin. Bart walked over, his demeanor calm as he bent down to help us up. He dusted us off, shaking loose grains from our shoulders and arms. Standing across from Sarah, I couldn't help but notice how she seemed to radiate a new beauty. She had always been pretty, but now she looked absolutely gorgeous, as if her essence had been transformed alongside her physical being. Forgetting that she could read my thoughts, she shot me a playful wink and said, "Yeah, you're not so bad yourself, kiddo." Heat rushed to my cheeks and I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. I quickly turned to Bart, hoping to change the subject. "What now?" "Now," Bart said, his voice steady and resolute, "we end the tide wraith once and for all." He turned towards the ocean, his expression filled with determination. "Follow me." Without another word, he sprinted into the water, diving below the surface with practiced ease. I exchanged a glance with Sarah, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through us. We nodded to each other, the connection between us strengthening, and then we followed Bart into the ocean, plunging into the depths together. As we dove into the water, I felt an exhilarating rush. It was as if we had transformed into fish, darting effortlessly through the depths. Our movements were fluid and instinctual, propelling us faster than I ever thought possible. The ocean enveloped us, darkening as we descended, yet somehow we could see perfectly. It was as if the water had become a part of us, revealing its secrets in vivid detail. Strange fish flitted past, their scales shimmering with colors I had never seen before, while underwater plants swayed gracefully, glowing with iridescent hues. The beauty of this underwater world was breathtaking, and I felt a sense of wonder wash over me. Before long, we approached an underwater cave, the entrance beckoning us with an almost magical allure. We swam inside, and as we emerged into a larger chamber, I felt the rush of air fill my lungs. Bart pulled himself up onto the shore, and I quickly helped Sarah up beside me. "Welcome to my humble abode," Bart said, a proud smile on his face as he surveyed the impressive space around us. I looked around, awestruck. The cave was filled with artifacts and aged weaponry, remnants of battles fought long ago. It was like stepping into a hidden treasure trove, a testament to the history of the fables. As I examined the surroundings, my gaze settled on a map pinned to the wall. It had a circled location marked boldly in red. "Is this where it lives?" I asked, excitement bubbling within me. Bart nodded. "Yes." Before I could process that information, Bart suddenly threw a knife at me with astonishing speed. Time seemed to slow as I watched the blade hurtling toward me. Instinctively, I turned away, performing a backward handspring to avoid it. But as I landed, I caught sight of Bart launching 3 more knives at me simultaneously. My heart raced as I rolled to dodge them, adrenaline coursing through my veins. To my surprise, I managed to catch one of the knives midair, gripping it tightly in my hand. I turned around, ready to confront Bart about the unexpected assault, only to see that Sarah had been subjected to the same barrage. However, she had somehow managed to catch all 3 knives with grace and precision. Bart laughed triumphantly, clearly pleased with our reactions. "Now we're ready." He grabbed a few more supplies from around the cave, tossing them into a backpack. "On my lead," he instructed, his voice filled with authority. As I glanced at Sarah, her expression mirrored my own determination. We were no longer just participants in this strange journey. We were warriors, ready to face whatever lay ahead. With Bart leading the way, we prepared to venture deeper into the unknown, our hearts pounding with the promise of the battle to come. Sarah and I followed Bart deeper into the ocean, the water wrapping around us like a cool embrace. We swam for what felt like 30 minutes, our movements effortless as we navigated the depths. Finally, we spotted another underwater cave, its entrance beckoning us forward. Once inside, we emerged into another chamber filled with air. As I took a deep breath, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. But that relief quickly turned to shock when I noticed a figure slumped against the far wall. It was the older sister from before. She looked pale and blue from a lack of oxygen. Bart didn't hesitate. He walked up to her and, to my astonishment, began to breathe air into her, not from his mouth, but through his skin, like some kind of osmosis. It was a surreal sight, and I watched in awe as the color slowly returned to her face. After a few seconds, she took a deep breath, her eyes fluttering open. "What's happening?" she screamed, panic flooding her voice. "Where's my little sister?" "Calm down," Bart said softly, his tone soothing. "She's okay. You're gonna be all right." He turned to Sarah. "Take her back to the surface. I can breathe for her, but you need to time your ascent carefully so the pressure doesn't hurt her." As Bart explained the timing, I approached the older sister. "I'm a lifeguard," I said, trying to convey reassurance. "Your little sister is all right. I found her, and she's waiting at the police station." Tears welled up in her eyes as relief washed over her. "Thank you. Thank you so much," she exclaimed, gratitude pouring from her every word. Just then, Bart came up beside her and placed a hand on the sister's shoulder. In an instant, she passed out again, her body going limp. "She won't remember this," Bart explained, his voice steady. "Sarah, leave her on the beach by the lifeguard tower. Be careful not to be seen by anyone or any cameras." With a nod, Sarah picked up the girl with surprising ease, her new strength evident, and then jumped back into the ocean. I watched as she disappeared beneath the surface, knowing she would take the sister back to safety. Bart and I exchanged glances, a shared understanding passing between us. We both turned towards an opening in the chamber, and from within it, I could hear a low growl reverberating through the water. Bart's voice echoed in my mind, cutting through the tension. "No more talking aloud. I can feel its thoughts. It knows we're here." A chill ran down my spine, but there was no turning back now. With our hearts pounding in unison, we began to move toward the source of the growl, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As Bart and I walked through the opening, we stepped into what I could only describe as the Tide Wraith's lair. The chamber was filled with air, but the ominous presence of a large pool of water at its center drew my attention. It looked deep, its surface shimmering under the dim light, and I could see a fin emerging from the water, slicing through the surface like a knife. I felt a tremor of fear as Bart's voice resonated in my mind. "Show yourself." In response, a voice emerged from the depths, a sound that was death personified, rusty and gravelly. It sent shivers coursing through every part of me. "Go away, Fable, or I'll take your new recruits this time too." Bart's resolve hardened. "I demand that you fight me. I will avenge my love." At those words, the Tide Wraith rose from the water, revealing a body that was both scaly and ripped. He looked like a grotesque combination of a bodybuilder and a merman, his form both imposing and terrifying. His eyes were large, but only partially opened, resembling something between a human and a fish. The face had an unsettling resemblance to that of a monkey, but in fish form. As he stood, his massive tail morphed into legs, tree trunk-sized and powerful. He towered at least 7 feet tall, and a foul odor of decay wafted from him, like a rotting corpse. Bart never took his eyes off the creature, unwavering and full of determination. "Your love?" the Tide Wraith mocked, a grin spreading across his face. Bart grimaced at the mention of Nirvana. The Tide Wraith's smile widened. "Ah, the one who was with you when we first met?" Intrigue filled his eyes. "Tell me, did you feel the connection die whenever she did? If this is what this is all about, then how about I trade my freedom for information on her?" Bart's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" The Tide Wraith chuckled darkly. "You see, I was never meant to kill her, so I didn't. I was more of an errand boy. It was only my job to deliver her." "Deliver her?" Bart echoed, his demand for more information mingling with disbelief. "You give me your word that you'll let me go, and I'll tell you everything." The Tide Wraith replied, his gravelly voice smooth like silk over gravel. I could sense Bart's indecision, and I stepped forward, urgency mounting within me. "He's lying, Bart. Don't trust him." But Bart didn't seem to hear my warning. Instead, he locked eyes with the Tide Wraith. "I agree. I won't kill you," he said, determination in his voice. I understood what was happening in that moment. Bart would let him go, but I wouldn't. I knew Bart was aware of this too. The Tide Wraith, sensing his advantage, sat down, his massive frame settling onto the ground as if preparing to reveal a dark story. "Very well then," the Tide Wraith said, a smirk dancing on his lips. "Let me tell you the story of your beloved." The air thickened with tension as I stood beside Bart, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. We were on the brink of uncovering secrets that had haunted Bart for years, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. The Tide Wraith began his tale, his gravelly voice echoing in the chamber. After the war, I was instructed to run. I made my way here, preying on humans who wandered too far from the beach. It was easy work until I was visited by a myth." He paused, his expression darkening. This myth didn't have a face. It was just a presence, an aura that only the highest level of myths can produce. I listened to him because he commanded respect. He told me that he had led 2 members of the Order of the Veil to me. The Tide Wraith continued, his tone filled with a mix of reverence and resentment. He instructed me to kidnap the girl and leave the man alone. They thought they were tracking a siren, so their guard would be down. After all, sirens are easy kills. "What did you ask him?" Bart pressed, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "I asked why I should leave the man alone," the Tide Wraith replied. "The faceless myth told me to let him be, that he would think his sacred was gone. He said the man would hunt me for the rest of eternity, but I should always run away. I must never be caught." He continued, "The faceless myth was insistent that the man must remain here if the myths were ever to rise again." At this, Bart shifted in his stance. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. "I've narrowly escaped the man countless times. Or as I should say, I've narrowly escaped you countless times. But I'm tired of running. I want this to end here tonight." Bart's frustration bubbled to the surface. "I need to know more. Was there anyone with this faceless myth?" "The only other myth who knew about this interaction was one called Vargoth," the Tide Wraith explained, his voice tinged with bitterness. "I recognized him from the war. He seemed to be the faceless myth's right hand." At this, the Tide Wraith stood up again, his imposing figure looming over us. "Enough talk. Let's finish this once and for all." He motioned for Bart to step aside, a gesture that sent a chill down my spine. Bart turned to me, his tone serious. "Once a fable has given their word, they are compelled to keep it. I cannot help you defeat this beast, but you will prevail." With that, he pulled out a small dagger, its blade gleaming in the dim light. He handed it to me, and as soon as my fingers brushed against the hilt, the dagger transformed into a sword, its shape and weight feeling perfect in my grasp. "This weapon can be whatever you desire it to be," Bart said, his voice steady. "It's your birthright, as is the kill of this Tide Wraith." Bart stepped to the side, allowing me to confront the monster. As I walked forward, everything in me screamed to run, but beneath that fear lay a strange peace. I was meant for this. With every step, I felt the sword pulse in my hand, a connection forming between us. I was ready to face the Tide Wraith, ready to confront the darkness that had haunted Bart and now threatened my own life. As I approached, the Tide Wraith's eyes glimmered with malice and curiosity. This was it. The moment had arrived, and I was prepared to face whatever came next. The air thickened with tension as I raised the sword, its weight now a part of me. The Tide Wraith, towering and ominous, regarded me with an unsettling mix of intrigue and disdain. "You think you can end this?" he hissed, his voice like waves crashing against a rocky shore. "You're just a child playing with a toy." "I'm not a child," I shot back, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am the one who will put an end to your terror." With a flick of his wrist, the Tide Wraith summoned a surge of water that spiraled around him, forming a barrier between us. "You'll have to do better than that. You have no idea the forces you're dealing with." Bart's presence behind me was a comforting reminder of my purpose. "Focus on the truth, not the fear," he urged softly. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "You mentioned Vargoth. Where is he?" I demanded, hoping to sow doubt in the Wraith's mind. The Tide Wraith's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "You're smarter than most," he admitted, but the malice returned quickly. "But Vargoth has no interest in this fight. He is beyond your reach, and so are the powers he wields." "Then I'll make you talk," I declared, lunging forward with the sword raised high. The blade hummed with energy, and as it cut through the air, the Tide Wraith retaliated, sending a wave crashing towards me. I rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the deluge. Water splashed around me, soaking the ground, but I didn't hesitate. I sprang to my feet and charged again, this time aiming for the Wraith's heart. "Fool," he sneered, conjuring an even larger wave. "You cannot defeat me with mere strength." But I wasn't just relying on strength. I remembered Bart's words. The weapon could be whatever I desired. With a thought, I envisioned the sword transforming into a spear, its tip sharp and deadly. In an instant, it morphed and I thrust it forward, piercing through the rushing water and striking the tide wraith in the shoulder. He howled in rage, the water around him dissipating, revealing the vulnerability beneath his monstrous exterior. "You'll pay for that," he growled, but I saw fear flicker in his eyes for the first time. "Tell me about Vargoth," I demanded, my voice cutting through his fury. "What does he want?" The tide wraith staggered back, struggling to maintain his composure. "Vargoth seeks to unleash ancient powers, to reclaim dominion over the myths. He believes that only through chaos can the true strength of our kind be realized." "Then he's wrong," I asserted, determination surging through me, "and you're wrong if you think you can stop me." With renewed purpose, I swung the spear again, aiming not just to defeat him, but to shatter the chains of fear he had wrapped around so many lives. The tide wraith, sensing the tide of the battle turning, unleashed a final desperate surge of water, but I was ready. I transformed the spear back into a sword, its blade glowing with an ethereal light. I infused it with everything I had, the hope of those he had tormented, the strength of my resolve, and the light of my own spirit. As I drove it forward, the surge of energy met the wraith's darkness head-on. In an explosion of light and water, the chamber erupted around us. I felt the sword connect, piercing through the heart of the tide wraith, and in that moment, it was as if time stood still. He gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief, and then slowly, he began to dissolve into mist, his form breaking apart like waves receding from the shore. "You think this is the end?" he rasped, his voice fading. "You have no idea what horrors await you." As his final words echoed into silence, I fell to my knees, breathing heavily. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Bart approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've done well, but remember, the darkness does not vanish with one victory. We must prepare for what comes next." I nodded, the weight of his words settling in my heart. The tide wraith was gone, but Vargoth was still out there, and I knew that my journey was only just beginning. The air was still, heavy with the remnants of the tide wraith's presence. I stood there, the sword still clutched tightly in my hand, feeling a mix of triumph and disbelief. Bart approached, his expression a mixture of pride and something unspoken. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, and I could sense the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "You did it, Jake," he finally said, his voice low. "You faced a legend and won. But—" His gaze drifted away, a troubled look shadowing his features. I thought I would feel a connection to Nirvana, but it's gone. A chill ran through me at the mention of her name. The thought that she might still be alive lingered in the air, but Bart's uncertainty hung like a fog. "We need to find Vargoth," he declared with newfound determination. "I know exactly where to look." I could see the fire in his eyes, the urgency that drove him. "But it's dangerous," he warned, his tone serious. I chuckled, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "I just fought a legendary urban legend. I figured it would be dangerous." There was a confidence in my voice that surprised even me. Bart smirked, the tension easing just a bit. "Fair enough, but let's not rush into this. We should gather ourselves first." As we moved through the tide wraith's lair, the remnants of his dark reign lay scattered around us. Shadows clung to the corners, and a sense of unease settled in my stomach. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon the grisly remains of the wraith's victims. Skeletons lay strewn about, their empty eye sockets staring into nothingness. A moment of silence enveloped us, a haunting tribute to lives lost in the clutches of darkness. I felt a weight in my chest as I looked at the remnants, each one telling a story cut tragically short. Then Bart reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box of matches. He struck one against the rough surface, and the flame flickered to life. "For them," he said softly, holding the match over the remains. As the flame caught, I watched it consume the matchstick, the fire dancing elegantly before it extinguished. We both stood in silence, honoring the lives that had been taken, allowing the burning matches to symbolize our respect for their memory. Once the last match had burned out, we made our way back to the original spot of the cave. Bart turned to me, his expression suddenly lighter. "I saw the way you looked at Sarah," he said, a teasing grin forming on his lips. I raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "What do you mean?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Come on, Jake. You can't hide it. Your feelings for her will only continue to grow." I felt my cheeks flush, and I quickly changed the subject. So about Vargoth, where do we find him? Bart's expression shifted, turning serious again. Come on, I'll fill you and Sarah in later. Right now is a time for celebration. With that, he took my arm, and we made our way to the edge of the cave. We both jumped into the ocean, the cool water enveloping us like a comforting embrace. The thrill of the fight, mixed with the exhilaration of life, surged through me, washing away the remnants of fear and doubt. Half an hour later, we emerged back on the beach, droplets of water glistening in the sunlight. There, waiting for us, was Sarah, her expression a mix of worry and relief. I couldn't help but smile at the sight of her, the warmth of her presence grounding me. The adventure was far from over, but in that moment, I felt a sense of belonging. Together, we would face whatever lay ahead. And so, with the sun setting on the horizon, we stood united, ready for whatever challenges awaited us. The familiar aroma of roasted coffee beans enveloped us as we settled into our usual spot at Minutte's coffee shop. The warm ambiance felt comforting after the chaos we had just emerged from. Sarah took a sip of her latte, a smile spreading across her face as she looked at us. "I can't believe the search party was out there," she began, her tone animated. "When I got to the beach with the older sister, they were scouring the area. I left her a few meters away from the lifeguard station. I wanted to make sure they found her, so I waited nearby. Once they did, I went to hang out by the rocks." Bart nodded, his expression earnest. "You did the right thing, Sarah. I'm proud of you for being there for her." She beamed at Bart's praise, then turned her teasing gaze to me. "And speaking of being proud, I would have loved to see you in action, Jake. Fighting a tide wraith? That's pretty epic." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and admiration for her. "It was nothing, really," I mumbled, still taken aback by how beautiful she looked. Bart chuckled softly, sensing my discomfort. "You should have seen him, Sarah. He was fearless, but you would have been proud of him." As the conversation shifted, Bart leaned forward, his tone turning serious. "Now, about Vargoth. He's among a high tier of myths, but he's never been top tier. He always clung to someone strong enough to protect and benefit him. The last time I saw him was in Mexico." Sarah and I exchanged glances, a sense of foreboding creeping in. "Have you ever heard of La Llorona?" Bart continued, his voice casual. We both froze, the name sending a chill down my spine. "You mean the urban legend about the woman who cries for her dead children?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yep, that's her," Bart confirmed nonchalantly. "That was his girlfriend back in the day." Sarah and I traded incredulous looks, the weight of Bart's words settling heavily between us. "Wait, are you serious?" I asked, trying to wrap my mind around the implications. Bart nodded, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We leave for Mexico tomorrow morning, so get some rest. And by the way, she has a pet. He's called El Nawal." I furrowed my brow in confusion. "Isn't that a shapeshifter?" Bart laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Go get some rest, you two." As we walked back to my house, the night air was filled with an electric sense of change. I glanced at Sarah, who was walking beside me, her expression thoughtful. "So, how are you doing after all this?" I asked, trying to make sense of the whirlwind our lives had become. She laughed lightly, a sound that felt both comforting and surreal. "All things considered, I'm fine. I mean, just yesterday we were mortal lifeguards worried about paying rent and buying groceries. Now we're immortalized warriors battling monsters. It's a lot to take in." "I know what you mean," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "It's like we stepped into a completely different world." "I feel like I finally have control of my life," she continued, her voice filled with a newfound strength. "That's something I've never really experienced before. It's empowering." As we approached my house, I turned to her. "Meet me here tomorrow morning before we meet Bart?" "Sure," she replied, a smile brightening her face. Then, with a hint of seriousness, she added, "Hey, Jake, if we really do live forever, and we lose our families and everyone we've ever known, I'm glad I'll still have you." With that, she turned and walked away, her silhouette framed by the glow of the streetlights. I watched her go, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. I didn't know how my future would unfold, but as long as Sarah was by my side, I felt a sense of reassurance. Everything would be all right. Reaching into my pocket for my house key, my fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. I pulled out a storage locker key attached to a note. It read, "Meet me here at 9 a.m. Don't forget to bring your girl. Wink, wink, Bart." I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Ah, the life of a monster hunter. I could get used to this. With a smile on my face, I headed inside, ready for whatever came next.